Very good.
Hello, Marky Dragon, also known as Marcus Eikenberry in real life, and today I have with me Mr. Richard Garriott. Well, actually, maybe I should say Lord British, also known as Richard Garriott in real life.
Either one or both work fine, just for me.
So happy to have you here today, and let's see here. I got a lot of questions that have come in. And would you believe it or not that back in the days when we had an Ultima Online fan site, at our peak we had 53 volunteers, and all working on the site. And as of today, we just opened up a fan site for Shroud of the Avatar, and we already have 40 people on board.
Excellent.
It is so amazing, so amazing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so for those who this is their first time they've heard about Shroud of the Avatar, can you just quickly tell us what it is?
Sure. So for those who don't know me, for those of you who are younger than myself, to be sure, I think there are a few gamers that are older. For the first 20 years of my career, I wrote a series of games called Ultima, a medieval fantasy role-playing series that for 20 years were, I think, some of the pinnacle landmark solo-player games, story-driven games, with a real focus on deep storytelling that is still, it's not completely uncommon, but it's rare, not the most common form of RPGs, which are more usually level grinding. And then the last Ultima was Ultima Online, the first big MMO, the first massively multiplayer game. And but it's been almost 15 years since I've gone back and written a medieval fantasy role-playing game, and I think the time is right to come back right now to do that. Not only because I think that games in the style that I wrote, with the type of story crafting that I did, are ripe for renewal. And we also have a great, what we think is a great plan for how to do multiplayer and how to make a game that, while being clearly story-based, a solo-player-driven, solo-player kind of a story-based experience, you can play this experience as offline and solo-player as you wish, or dialed up selectively up to what you would really is very similar to a traditional persistent world, massively multiplayer type experience. Where everyone can play together and see the shared persistent world. And so for both creative reasons and technical reasons, I think this is a great time to come back and reestablish myself, hopefully as one of the leading developers of role-playing games.
Yeah, well, I know that if, it's like when you invest in stocks, past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
Of course.
But I think you have a good track record, and that is, if anything, I think that's a good indication of what the future may hold for us.
Yeah, I would like, of course, I'm trying to make that case to the player base too, the way I would describe it, one of the reasons why we're doing this crowdfunding campaign goes back to my analysis or one piece of the analysis of my previous work. I look at least my favorite pieces of my past work, and I think they were Ultima 4 for beginning the virtues and doing these kind of moral plays where your behavior is judged in the game. Ultima 7 for how deep the virtual world was simulated. And Ultima Online by how successfully we not only brought into existence the massively multiplayer arena, but also how the non-combat roles were so completely simulated, where you as a player could have a full life completely outside and unrelated to combat or unrelated to any storytelling. You could live your life as a merchant or as a blacksmith. What's interesting about all three of those games, in all three of those cases, my own sales department, much less my parent company's sales departments, had very little faith in what I was undertaking. When I was doing Ultima 4, they thought, making people play as a good guy, as goody two-shoes, isn't going to go over. And the realistic simulation I was putting in Ultima 7, they were going like, yeah, nobody's going to care. It's way too detailed. And with Ultima Online, just nothing like that ever been done before at all. And so the sales projections were, 1% of what they ended up being. Yet we stood our ground because we passionately believed in it. So we fought and got those games done. On the other hand, my least two favorite launches that I've had in my history were Ultima 8 and Tabula Rasa. And I think both those games actually had some really brilliant ideas behind them. But in both those cases, that was just after I had sold my company to another company. And so the influence another company's sales department had on what I was doing, and in the case of Ultima 8, I was strongly encouraged, shall we say, to cut it and cut it and cut it, to where when it was launched, it was buggy and frankly incomplete.
To us players, we all saw it as where the investors had the influence, and not your creativity and your vision for the game.
Exactly. And Tabula Rasa similarly went under 3 almost complete reboots while we tried to appease our new masters, so to speak. And those people, not that their intentions were bad in either one of those cases. It was people were giving advice they thought was accurate. It just isn't advice that served the type of product that I create. And so that's what brought us coming back to the player base. I mean, for Portalarium and for this product, I've already invested millions of my own money, and we have other investors who have put in money as well, of course. But we still need to either form a relationship with another larger publisher to help bring this whole thing to market and fund the get the funding further sooner, or we have to go to the public. And the nice thing about basically pre-selling the game into the public is that if you're going to be beholden to someone for the features, you want to be beholden to the people who are going to play it.
Absolutely.
And so that's all. And already, by the way, just in the week that we've been live, we've already received incredibly useful feedback. Not only support for the things that were kind of some of the fundamentals we needed to do, but fine-tuning even some of the ideas we had. We've been able to really tune them in a way that I think will make a much better game based on the player feedback. So I'm really looking forward to that, what I call two-way street of being beholden to my audience, to the players, not a third step removed sales department.
When you open up a shop on a corner, a brick and mortar, your customers are your boss, and it's that way. Just in this instance right here, that I guess that if we all said no, don't do it that way, that you kind of have to listen.
Exactly. Well, I can tell you. I can give you a precise example of how that's happened already. For Shroud of the Avatar, I already wanted to make the game playable offline, frankly, because I wanted to be able to play it offline. Because I do a lot of my gaming when I'm not connected. I travel a lot. I'm on airplanes a lot, and I'm going like, well, on the one hand, while I really want to create if I want to create a blacksmith, I want that blacksmith to be seen by other people, by all means, and vice versa. If my friend has a blacksmith, I want to be able to go buy from their shop. But I want the game to at least to work when I'm offline. And I know that makes it complex because you got to figure out, make sure people aren't cheating and that sort of thing. But I wanted to be able to to play for at least some period of offline play without destroying the game. And so that's how we began to architect it, was so that it was really a multiplayer game. But we already had this, the throttling of multiplayer is to favoring your friends before friends of friends before strangers, and that would allow you to play at least for a period of time offline before checking in, shall we say. But one of the first pieces of feedback we got from players, which honestly I didn't anticipate at that level of frequency or strength, was that people said, look, if I really want to play completely offline, I want to start a character and never connect, and I'm willing to sacrifice not only not seeing other people, but seeing the changes to the persistent world that they might have over time. And I'm going like, well, okay, that's by the way, since we're already 3/4 of the way down there technically, and so it was very easy for us to say, no problem, we'll give you that ability. It was already a story-driven game. It's already sort of a solo player-like story portion experience. So sure, play it offline from beginning to end, no problem.
And so, but that character, player feedback. That character would not be able to port to the online world.
Right, and again, those are details we're now working out. Since we adopted that idea, but yeah, presumptively, because in theory you could hack your solo player player we probably will prevent you from being able to take that character online. But it's really funny. As strong, as vehement as there's some people that are going, I really want UO again. I want the open, deep simulation and non-combat roles of UO. There's one camp that says that's what I want and nothing else. There's another camp that's saying I don't want an online experience. I really want a solo player game. We have a large constituency already that is in those two very opposed camps. And while I get that, I really do, and I'm going to absolutely provide that to people precisely as they want it. We are tuning it so it'll do that both those goals, I think, very well. That being said, I actually think we have a new interpretation for what a multiplayer game is that will satisfy both people. And so, we'll see. And if I'm wrong, don't worry. You can play it in the very MMO-like experience. You can play it in the very solo-like experience. But the way we're doing this selective multiplayer, and I'm still looking for a term, so that's the best term I have so far, where you get in, you can dial up and say what level of exposure to the persistent world and other people I'm willing to take. I think the default setting it might come up with, which basically says, I do care about my friends. I want to see them, and I'm probably willing to see their friends of friends. And on occasion, if there's reason for you to bring somebody in front of me because we have some common purpose or reason to have a shared goal that won't just be transient one meeting, but might actually let me meet somebody new that I will care about to incorporate in my personal tribe, my real tribe over time, then sure, let them come in too. And you'll see all the persistent changes. So every shop and all the creative output, so to speak, of all people will be visible in the world. That's what I'll call the default setting. I actually think that is going to provide the upside of the MMO persistent world without a lot of the downside of just random strangers mucking with your ability just to think and follow the story. In a way that, I believe it'll be a kind of a new. I know other people have toyed with similar things, but I think this is going to work particularly well for a story-based role-playing game akin to historic Ultimas, and yet capture the essence of the best parts of UO as well.
And so, with how you're describing this, now I always played a merchant in UO. And I've tried to play it in some other games, but it hasn't ever worked so successfully.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And so, will I be able to play a merchant
Absolutely.
here?
Absolutely.
And so,
here's the way I would describe that, if I might. If you think of World of Warcraft, which is a brilliant game, I've played a bunch of it myself, love it. The Blizzard guys do challenge and reward cycles for leveling way better than I've ever done in my life. I admire it and I study it. That being said, all players of World of Warcraft are first and foremost a combatant. And while you might have some other crafting skills on the side that specifically might be somewhat different than someone else, I don't know of anybody that spends their life in World of Warcraft, at a shop that they've built or bought, and really that's what they do, is they're a crafter. For you to advance, you really have to be part of the leveling game, and that really means combat. And so, and even in UO, well, you said you were a merchant the whole time. I would say that probably is 20 to 35% of the people, a fifth to a third of the people fit that description. That still leaves more than half of the people are combatants. But that's fine. I mean, I think 20% support services, you might say, or these other ways to advance are enough to really deepen the online experience.
How when you say though that when I play, I'm going to have my immediate friends and maybe friends of friends and a few other people that are relevant. If I'm a merchant, how do I get access to all so that I can sell my stuff to everyone?
Excellent. So one of the ways we're doing it, so first of all, our persistent world, I'm hoping, is one shard, not multiple shards. And let me tell you why that one piece of data combined with the second piece of data are so important. You may have seen we've also decided to go to a dual scale map. And a lot of people are questioning, why didn't you do single scale map? And there's a number of reasons of speed and efficiency for us and for you that we went to dual scale. But a really key one is how we're doing multiplayer. If you think of a classic MMO experience, your computer is really just a graphics terminal. It's a dumb terminal to the server, which is handling all of the math and the AI for all the creatures and everything happening in the game world. But on the other hand, since we wanted to play offline, we first of all put that server sort of on your computer first of all. So your computer is both the client and the server. So you are capable of being a server. You're always the server, at least to yourself, you might say.
Interesting.
but what that also means is that while the persistent world, whenever you build a shop, that shop will be stored on a central server. So when anybody else goes to a new town, they'll get the copy of that town as it is today, and that will include your shop.
Okay.
And that will include the vendor that is selling things you've made in front of your shop, because you're not online personally 24 hours a day. As you know, you're only going to play 4 to 8 to 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
But less than half the day probably. And so all the shops are going to have vendors in them to make sure that you can still sell the things you've made to people as they come by your shop. And every player who goes to the town where your shop is will see your shop and your vendor and buy your stuff. Period.
Okay.
But the question is will they see you personally? And the people who we believe that you care to see personally starts with people you actually care about, which are your friends.
Mm-hmm.
Now, statistically, your friends, may or may not be online at the same hour you are, and even if they are playing at the same hour, they may not be in the same city. So, for some odds, you won't see that person. And so we let you say, I'm willing to see my friends of friends, or we let you say, I'm willing to see everybody. We don't care. If you want to play completely MMO-like, that's fine. Or effectively fine too. But what we do is every time you change maps, we go through that sort of people that we think you are willing to want to or be willing to be exposed to, and we see, is somebody already running the current version of that map that's in your friends list or in your people you're willing to be exposed to list?
Mm-hmm.
If the answer is yes to that, you just join them on their copy of the map. And that's the same thing for the outdoors, and it's the same thing for indoors. And so let's say you and I are friends. Let's say you go into a town where your shop is. Well, you're running the current version of that map. I go in, it validates with the server, does a few checks just to make sure we're not cheating, but then I just play with you. We're just playing between us. And if a third friend of friends would join us, they just join us, and they come into the map, we're all here together. If I'm the first person to leave the town, I now go up a level to the outdoor map. Well, now I'm running the outdoor map. If you leave the town, or your friend leaves the town, the other friend of ours, that goes to the outdoor map, and I'm already running it, we like to see each other, you guys just join me in my version. So we see each other walking around the outdoor map. You kind of get the idea. We just basically say, is there already an instance of this particular map running? And if so, you'll join it.
And is it in the instance? Does that run on your servers, or does that run on my machine?
Your machine.
Okay.
The servers, of course, doing a little bit of validation work of here and there, and it's making sure that we have the current copy of all the persistent objects, etc. But the live changes and the results of combat and other things are really handled as much as possible, everybody on their own machine, and only validation is shared between machines and ultimately then the servers.
And so then if we have somebody who's hosting the map who has lag?
Well, don't forget, everybody's trying to do things simultaneously. So as much as possible, your machine is just running on its own. And so we only send each other certain pieces of information about, okay, I moved to X, Y position over here. And I don't think it matters much if there's a little slop in that I went around the tree to the left or I went around the tree to the right. You mostly care I saw my friend walk over to that tree. And so, we'll have to see how this plays out over time, but that is that's the intent. We think it will save server costs. We think it'll save bandwidth issues. We think it'll let people see the people they really think care about. It's got enough client server to keep cheating relatively at bay, we think. But that's how we're building, and I think we'll be something we can bring to the players and iterate on, and then add depth to the game. Also by going to this dual scale map, it lets us do things like say, hey, that mountain range over there? Well, tomorrow there's now a volcano at that hex on that map. And there's a new dungeon that is opened inside of it where you can go down and fight some dragons, whatever it might be. It lets us change the persistent world, as we evolve it in a very interesting way, to where it's not just a static universe. It's a evolving universe. We can bring in new islands. We can, if one of the player groups wants to get together and have a town of their own, we can instantiate a town for them out in the middle of the wilderness somewhere. And
interesting. So that leads me to one of my questions I had on my list, which is, am I going to be able to own my own home?
Absolutely. I said absolutely, but I sort of shake my head. Absolutely. That's what I meant to say. But here's how we're doing this too: is that unlike UO, where you would commonly be able to, or you'd get a house deed and you'd be able to basically deploy it anywhere in the world you wanted, and then buy another house deed and deploy it, and another house deed and deploy it, where suddenly the entire world was filled with abandoned houses, and then we had abandoned ships and abandoned mounts of all kinds that we had to then go figure out a way to clean up. In this case, the travel scale map really doesn't have what I'll call housing. You can't put a house on a travel scale map. You have to zoom into the local map to be able to add a house in the local map. And so all of the villages and towns and cities have lots on them. Some lots are filled with central services that the game runs, and some lots are empty and available for players to plop their house down and say, I live here. And if they want to move, they pick up their house deed. Their house collapses, but stays as a unit, you might say, and they walk over to another town they'd rather live, and they buy that lot and deploy their house there.
Interesting.
And so yes, you can own your own house. The real estate will be worth differing amounts of both hypothetical and actual true value, just like it was in UO, where if you remember, Trinsic was the place where most people would go to do crafting, and so the road in and out of Trinsic kind of became the place where if you really wanted to have a flourishing blacksmith, you sort of wanted to be near Trinsic, and you sort of wanted to be on that main road access. And so that property value went way up. And in this case, we're putting most of what I'll call essential city services in the cities. Whether that be we're not exactly sure what we're going to do with things like auction house yet, but I'll hypothetically call it an auction house and a bank, and maybe the standard weapons and armor shops or magic shops, the things that the game operates. They'd be right there in the core of that city. And so therefore, the small amount of retail of real estate that remains will be of high value because of the traffic that goes through it.
Mm-hmm.
The other end of the spectrum is the little villages. So we might have little villages hither and yon around the world, and they'll have a couple of things. You might have a pub or some other, whatever we deem is required for a player walking around in the wilderness, at least might get some basic provisions. But it'll have a lot more empty lots around it. And so property there will be less expensive because there's less assumed traffic flow for players.
Mm-hmm.
But as time goes on, both of those are limited. And so hypothetically, at any one moment of the game, the real estate could be sold out. Now, if we really sell out the real estate, we might kind of think, well, there's a really room somewhere on the map for another town. But we're not going to want to build town next to a town next to a town next to a town next to a town. The game won't look right. It'll be kind of the weird endless neighborhood thing. Mm-hmm. And so we're expecting real estate to remain quite uncommon, especially in a single shard world. Real estate's going to be tight.
Okay. Let me ask you about risk. So, this goes back to playing with friends. Do I have any risk when I'm a merchant and I'm carrying my stuff to my store that I'm going to get ganked?
Very good question, and we don't really have a solid answer for you yet, other than to describe what our intention or tendency is. But this is one of the things we're trying to work closely with the player base to refine properly. If you go back to UO, it was very open-ended at PvP. Mm-hmm. And while the guards tried to protect you in some cases, people found really clever exploits. My favorite was always you're running to the bank to drop off your treasure, and right as the roof pops off, you find that you've stepped into a teleporter. If you teleport in the woods where there are no guards to protect you, so people gank you and take everything you just spent hours accumulating. And of course, we also had the problem of the PKers preying on the newbies that were just getting started and really just had no idea what they were doing. And they'd say, "Hey, come out here in the woods with me. I'll help you." Whack them on the head and take all their stuff. So while we want there to be this feeling of risk, by all means, we understand the pleasure people had with being on the PK side of that equation. Mm-hmm.
There was also pleasure on the risk side of the equation.
Yeah, oh no.
Because that for me was one of the defining things of worrying, can I make it to the bank?
And as long as that worry is fair, then I think it's fair. The problem is that as a newbie who really has no idea there's this risk involved, or literally an exploit like the roof popping off, teleporting in the woods, I don't think those were fair. And so we're trying to find a way to weave that risk into the multiplayer part of the experience in a way that feels right. And so when we know we have at least one initial step, and we're willing to take on more. If people ask, we can push this farther. But we know that at least this step we're willing to make, which is that we already have plotline ideas where we know we want to give you a plot element that means that there are other players who will be interested, willing, and open to hunt you. And so, imagine the case where, you're going to be taking something that's very valuable, especially to one faction, or let's say it's contraband in the general sense of the word, but we really need to take it from the East Coast to the West Coast. So if you're willing to take that on, it warns you in advance that, hey, by the way, you're going to be, there's going to be a lot of people, including players, who are going to be trying to stop you. So it'll be worth a lot if you can make it, but beware. And then along your way, then of course we'll also immediately go tell a bunch of people that, hey, by the way, you're running some stuff from East Coast to West Coast. Keep your eye out. So they'll start looking for you. And then we'll even make it to where if you run on the main roads, you might think that's the safest way to go from an NPC standpoint, but it's too obvious from watching out for PCs. So maybe I'll take go around the mountains or something, which might be more dangerous from an NPC standpoint, but it might avoid at least the main traffic of PCs. And of course, if you're a hunter PC, you might go, I think he might do that. So I'm going to look for a pinch point in the mountains where I know he'll have to come by. You get the general idea. We'll try to set up these cat and mouse kinds of events where it is effectively agreed to. We also we have our fiction has some geographic areas where the resource acquisition and the nature of the malevolence in the region might make it appropriate to have those be what I'll call PvP regions, to where you know about that risk if you go into these areas. But you get the idea. We're still trying to work out exactly how open or closed or voluntary or flag setting PvP will be. Jury's still out. But that's where we're hoping for feedback from y'all.
Speaking of working things out, so from the demo, I haven't watched all the videos and everything, but it looks like you're using like Unity for the demo.
That's correct.
And
we're going for. I mean, I'm very happy with those tools and the render pipeline. What people, the one thing we're trying to get people to recognize, though, is that the art that is in there is all very prototype art. I mean, frankly, a lot of it is
that's all purchased art.
It's all, it's all either from the Unity store or 3D shops. There's a few pieces that are beginning to show up in there that are the art we've created with our team, but that's the place that we're hoping to staff up right at the end of this crowdsourcing effort, is get more artists into the company. That's why we tried to now front load our Kickstarter page with some of the art that we have. We have one concept artist and we have one modeler, and so so you can understand it's kind of slow in coming. But there are a few things in there. There's some of our kind of introduction of technology bits are in there. A few things in some of the dungeons. You'll see some machines that we've been building, things like that. And now that new Skull Island and this drawbridge scene that may or may not be up yet, but is coming up, I think, today, where we're trying to showcase not only the visual style, but show you how we're doing puzzle solving. If you're on the outside of a moat and a drawbridge, now how are you going to find a way to get into this town? And so we're trying to build purposeful weak points around that you can see and consider mentally, and therefore find a way to break into this otherwise fortified city.
So you mentioned, staff development and everything. You have a date, an expected date of, what is it, October 2014?
For the
final release.
That's correct.
And that just seems like so much further than everybody else on Kickstarter.
Further away?
Yeah, further away.
Well, that's funny. We actually we went and read every other Kickstarter before we put ours up. I think that's pretty much in the.
That's in the norm.
I think that's the norm.
Okay.
But by the way, we're going to have the beta, alpha, and betas up here by the end of the year, because of the way. In fact, that's one of the huge advantages to Unity. Two big advantages that we really like. One is, as a rapid prototyping environment, it's the best I've ever seen. Phenomenally good. I'm regularly impressed with the tools of the Unity engine. The other thing that I really like about it is it's so easily multi-platform, which is why we so quickly came out and said, look, while we're making a PC game, trust me, we can easily make it for you for Macintosh. We can easily make it for you for Linux. Those are really not huge stretches for us. Um, and then I have said, even though I don't think most of the players care, I myself like to play while I'm traveling around mobile, so I'm hoping we can get a tablet version out, and Unity does a good job of throttling down to let us shoehorn it in on a tablet, hopefully. But because of the rapid prototyping capability and really the power of those tools, that's why I have such confidence that we'll be able to let people into the what I'll call the alpha beta process as early as this fall. And it might be possible. Depends how well this Kickstarter campaign goes. If we make the $1 million that we intend, which I think we're well on track to do.
Oh yeah, you guys are well on your way.
Then we'll get into what I'll call our nominal development plan. But if we manage to go past, say, 2 million and maybe make 3 million, then I actually think that we can do one or the other of either start deepening the non-combat professions at launch and things like that, non-combat professions, as well as a whole variety of features that we can what I'll call deepen, and/or we can bring it in sooner. And so, depending on, again, we'll work with the players as to see which are they more eager to have once we get the alpha out. We'll say, okay, how is the scope of this gameplay? Do you rather us take the time to create more scope before you get a chance to really run with it, or would you rather really get in and start playing a persistent character right now, and we'll expand those other roles in live or with the next episodes?
That sounds awesome. Now, I have another question, and this is about weapons and armor. One of the things that certainly drew me to Ultima Online was that I could have like a sword of vanquishing. And the vanquishing was the attribute on that particular sword. And you could have, 3 or 4 different attributes on a sword, something like that.
Yep.
And so you end up with these really long names. But they were pretty fantastic. And how are you going to handle naming weapons and armor in the game?
Well, let me answer the general question at the same time, which is combat in general. How is combat itself going to play out? Because first of all, for weapons, I think you'll find it to be very similar in the sense of that all weapons can have a variety of these additive traits. And those traits make the weapon unique compared to somebody who might also have another sword. Your sword is different than their sword. But in the more general case, and this is something we'll hopefully talk more about during the Kickstarter campaign. In a more general case of combat, there's kind of 2 old school ways of doing combat. There's what I'll call the original Diablo method, which is let me just wade through a bunch of bad guys and kill them in rapid succession, and I feel very powerful as I sweep my way through the onslaught of bad guys, through just kind of click and go. Then there's the classic MMO method of combat, which is, hey, I have a shortcut bar, and I load up that shortcut bar with all my buffs and debuffs that I want to get on before I enter combat, and then all my best damage over time, least cooldown strategy, to where you can almost macro the pre-combat and almost macro post-combat to do your maximum damage over time and be as protected as possible. And we're trying to do neither of those. What we're trying to do is we said, look, we're taking a cue really from the card game era, where if you think about the skill trees that we're putting in the game, so let's look at combat skills. If I use a sword, a skill might be a parry and riposte. A skill might be a giant cleave or a finishing move, or or a roundhouse sweep that might injure people all the way around me with my sword. Those might be skills I could invest some of my experience in to have as a skill. Well, then before you go into combat, we want to let people go to all the skills they have and prepare them. Prepare whichever list they would like. And the metaphor I use is, imagine like when our U.S. military is about to go invade a desert country like, say, Iraq, we go do desert maneuvers for months or weeks ahead of that. And that's to bring those desert maneuvers to the forefront of your mind so that in the real time of actual combat, good odds you'll think of one of those maneuvers versus how to breathe through a straw in a swamp. And you might know how to breathe through a straw and sneak up on somebody in the swamp, but that's really not what you need in your mind for this combat. You need in your mind for this combat desert tactics. And so, so you prepare those, you rehearse those in advance. So what we're going to do is let you, fill a bag, so to speak, of the little runes or whatever it might be for the skills that you're going to use in combat. And now when you're in combat, as opposed to having all these things in a permanent shortcut bar, they're just going to come to your mind periodically. And we don't have the UI finished yet, but the concept is that you'll think of these things. I know when I was a tournament fencer, I didn't have every one of the skills I'd ever practiced pop into my head at the exact moment it would have been useful. Instead, I often would look back at the end of a battle or a fight and go, oh, I knew this maneuver. Why didn't I think of it? And just because it didn't happen to come in your mind. And so the more stuff you cram in your bag, the less frequently any one thing will come to your mind. The fewer moves you've drilled in and narrow in on, the more things will come to your mind. And so for a weapon, you can imagine that, my sword and your sword, if my sword had the aspect of shield hooking on it, maybe it's a curved sword that it has the normal slash moves of a sword, but it also has the ability to grab your shield and pull it down. And so that would be a special skill that would be available to me because I have that special particular sword. And so that would be one of the pantheon of skills that I can prepare for in combat as I go into combat.
Sounds like real medieval times.
Could be. Yeah, could be. And so anyway, and by the way, that's a system that will, combat inevitably is one of the, well, first of all, it's one of the most essential core features of any game, much less a role-playing game, much less a game that at least 50% of the players will spend a huge amount of their time in combat. And so this will be one of those things where good odds will have built and rebuilt that system, a couple of times by the time it's done. But we want to do that in concert with the players, not in a vacuum.
So let's move on to another subject here. Let's talk about money in game. Is there going to be a banking system?
So there will be in-game gold by all means, and what's interesting is as much as companies have always tried to fight gold farmers and a connection to real money and virtual currency, I think it's inevitable. I'm not really sure there's a practical way. I mean, there are some games where it is literally banned because there's no way to even trade things between players. But I tend to fall on the side of at least allowing some kind of what I'll call direct commerce, direct trade between players.
So you're saying you're going to allow some RMT?
Well, maybe, but I mean, I don't think we're going to let people what I'll call cash out coins for real dollars. I'm not worried about whether people can take money out in that sense. But here is the following description is a metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
So don't take this as a real example. But if you go back in Ultima Online, we built some theaters, and some people would say, "Hey, Lord British, come watch our play," and I would go watch their plays, whenever I could. And if you went to go see a play, there was a front door that went into the seats, and there was a back door that went onto the stage, but anybody who wanted to could jump up on the stage. And so often the audience did exactly that. Mm-hmm. And, in the real world, of course, it doesn't happen much.
Well, much.
And not only that, but the puppeteering skill that people had to make their actors act was not very good. But still, people tried, and they put on okay plays. But let's suppose we built a theater that gave people the tools to do a good play. And what that might look like is, first of all, the people that came in the front door had to pay $1. And even if they tried to talk, they couldn't say anything that would have disturbed the rest of the people watching, and they couldn't get up on stage. And you, the person who rented the theater, could give out passes to go backstage to whoever you had as your actors, and you got the actual money that came in through the front door. Well, now, if you're somebody who's going to go to a play, you're going to go like, well, I'm not going to pay a real dollar or the equivalent of a real dollar if I could buy gold in this game. I'm not, or just even my hard-earned, I've sold some swords and I have some gold. I'm not going to give away that hard-earned gold. I'm not going to walk through the door of this play if it's a crummy play. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of means that, then maybe there's an excuse for reviews of plays. And so then there might be a little side thing or websites that pop up that give you, hey, by the way, if you really want to see a good play versus the usual junky play, and so it might actually be worth $1 to come in and see, go see Marquee Dragons plays. And similarly, if you actually put on a good play and people are paying $1 to come in the front door, you will actually get rewarded for putting on a good play. And that means you might put on more good plays, or you'll actually study how to do the craft and lobby us as a developer to make sure we give you better and better puppeteering commands to be able to put on good plays. And so I think the benefits of a vibrant economy, and I'm not exactly sure I'm prepared to use the term of a real money economy, but we want to make sure that the 1% of people who are capable of making good artistic contributions to the world are rewarded as fully as we can embrace for those contributions. And so we're now looking at things like limited edition digital objects. Paint a picture. It's one thing. Paint this picture. Here it is for you. It's just a bitmap, and you can put it in your house. I would, if we can pull it off, I would definitely support things like that in the game, which then might mean that you build an artist community, in the world.
Right. I just want to caution one thing with that, which is like the failure of Diablo 3 with its attempting to allow players to do transactions with each other. It turned into a lot of a game of let's play business.
Yeah.
And so they were playing business, not fun. And that, well, you know that I have a deep history with real money economy and, all of that stuff. And I would love to see it, and I would love to participate in that and be a part of that. I also think that the implementations that we've seen lately have been very dramatically bad for the games that have tried to do it. And so, me personally, I would rather enjoy the game more than I enjoy the money I make from the game.
So. No, I agree. But don't forget, one of the things that we have to count on is the fact that people will consume the story portion of the game instantaneously. I mean, relatively speaking. I mean, I think it's going to be it's a full-length story as akin to any other solo-player Ultima. But they will still march their way through it as quickly as they choose to devote themselves. Which will then move them over into if they are still enjoying it, they enjoy the environment, or they just decided I don't want to do the story. Then they'll be driven over into the multiplayer social game of the crafting and fighting and resource management and those sorts of things. And so and a part of that, and by the way, even that will only last so far. You can only build so many skill trees. You can only build so many combat and non-combat professions. People will still consume that within some period of time. We'll, of course, be racing to try to stay ahead of the whole time. But if you can ordain, if the 1% of players who actually can be contributory, if you give them the tools to become contributory and be rewarded for their contributions, I think you can really enrich the game to yet another level. And so, again, how we pull those off and which one of those we pull off are yet to be seen. I think that people should trust me to make a great solo player story game. I've done that enough times in the past. I feel confident we can deliver on that. I think people should trust us that we're going to create a great new interpretation of a selectable levels of multiplayer game that can go anywhere from feeling pretty darn solo, in fact exactly solo, all the way up to feeling very MMO-ish. I think they can trust us on that because I think we've demonstrated our skill on that in the past. Anything that has to do with there's this issue of what I'll call close to real money trading. I agree. That'll be an experimental era. We'll go into that together, and trust me, since you are a bit of an expert on the subject, we'll be coming back to you often.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about it until the lawyers step in. They seem to every game that I've consulted on with RMT has had lawyers come in and put the kibosh on all of the creativity.
Oh, hilarious.
Yes. So, okay. Well, I have just a couple more things here. We'll wrap this up.
Sure.
Let's see. I have a link from our chat here who asked that it'd be nice to know more about the leveling. Is it going to be UO style, or can we go up and down and lock? How are the skills going to work? Are we going to have levels?
So it's similar to UO, but with some important differences. In UO, it was a classless system. It was really a skill-based system. The system we are doing is a largely skill-based system. But unlike UO, which was a usury-based skill system, where the more repetitions you did of weaving some cloth, then you would slowly move up to the next level of skill of weaving cloth. We felt that that kind of drove you into a not particularly fun form of grinding that encouraged people to macro or tape pennies on their keyboards in order to level up. And so we think that it will be better to be kinder than that. And so your character does have a quote level, but generally speaking, the only value of that level is it really describes how many skill points you have, or some multiple of the total skill points that you have to deploy into the skill trees that you have. And our intention is we're trying to be very careful to make sure we don't end up with what I'll call everybody maxed out as a giant tank mage and therefore not have the need of interdependence. And so we're trying to make sure that that whatever we think the level caps will be at each stage of the evolution of our game, that we still have enough both combat and non-combat professions to many times over absorb the skill points. And so you really can't at the same time be the best fighter and the best wizard and the best crafter and the best alchemist, all at the same time. But what we do want you to be able to do is this is you. I'm a big believer that I'm not a big fan of you log on with your good cleric and you help people, then you log off with the good cleric, you log on with your evil wizard right next to them, and then you kill the people you just walked out of the woods with. I'm a big believer. This is you. This is your avatar in this world. This is a projection of your mind, body, spirit, soul in this world, and so I don't want you to have to start over to go explore some new aspect of the game. If you spend the first 2 or 3 weeks studying swordplay, great. 2 or 3 weeks worth of swordplay. If you spend the next 2 or 3 weeks learning magic, you now know 2 or 3 weeks worth of magic. And so we're trying to make sure that that we facilitate people migrating from one what I'll call skill basis to another.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I'm not 100% sure what that vision is going to look like, except that if it's anything other than just leveling, I think I'm going to like it.
Yes, well, I can tell you the one thing we're trying to very much avoid is the level grind.
And is this one character? I mean, are we going to have multiple characters, or are we going to have just one?
You personally will have just one. Now, one little thing we can debate on the forums, by the way. So here, I'm about to mention another good forum topic, which is we've been discussing whether we can, and maybe might make a stretch goal here for us, do something like allow you to, since you and your real friends, statistically, again, most of the time, even if you and I we are real friends in the real world, but the odds of us being on the same map at the same time in reality are statistically low. And so, maybe it might be fun for me to be able to take out while you're gone your character along with me, so I have my party. My party is
companions.
Companions, and fill those companions with people I really know, with their permission, of course. So anyway, that's something we're talking about. But if you mean characters such as, can I have a saved game with the status of various characters? No, we really mean one. I mean, the only exception to the word one might be but the people who are really trying to play a single character offline forever, that character, I don't think, since you could have cheated it and hacked it and do whatever you want to have fun with your game that you're playing completely offline, we wouldn't really want you. It wouldn't be fair or reasonable for you to be able to then move that character back into the persistent world.
Right.
And so very likely that will be a separate character. Mm-hmm. But that's really the exception. We don't really mean for you to have multiple characters in the reality that we are creating.
Yeah. Okay. So one last question, and this is from Cajun Master Jedi in the chat. He says, "Can I transfer my character from UO over to Shroud, the Avatar?"
As strange a question as that seems, I think that might make another great stretch goal for us, is to go find a way to basically do that. Not just from UO, but we might do it from WoW and a few others, but obviously UO would be the best initial target.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the cases I'm trying to make to a lot of the players of not only UO but my previous work, is that this really is the spiritual successor. If you want the game that is designed and developed with the same passion, the same intention, the same ever-increasing goals of storytelling and immersion into the virtual world and pushing some limits of technology on your machine like we've occasionally done, we're the team to entrust with that problem or to solve that problem. And so, so what I'm trying to do is reach out to not only individual players, but frankly, there are groups like, the group from Pax Lair, the first town that was formed in UO that still exists today. The groups like the Guild, the Syndicate, which is the biggest MMO guild
Ever.
of all groups. They really got to start in Ultima Online.
Yeah.
The Dragons, who
I'm a dragon.
which came right out of Ultima Online. Nothing would please me more than to not just build a game that those individuals would like, but to build a game where those groups can feel like they can establish a beachhead for their group. Let's build a Dragons community, a city in homage to the Dragons. Let's build a city that is owned, operated, managed by the Syndicate. Let's build Pax Lair 2, new Pax Lair, in the new world. That would not only what I'll call help me out in the business sense, but I think that would really, if I can do that, I think it really lets me complete the statement of being the spiritual successor to my previous work.
That sounds awesome. So since this is the game is still in funding and on Kickstarter, and I see someone just posted the project here in chat. If you guys have made it this far into this show, then you're obviously interested enough to put down a few bucks to guarantee yourself a spot in the game. I think that is it the $30 spots that are still available, or maybe $33 slots?
33, I think, is
33
is the minimum entry at the moment. And by the way, obviously any pledge, 33 is I think a perfect way to make sure that you get the game. What you're really doing at that point is pre-buying the game, even at a discount for what it'll probably be out when it's launched at a pretty good discount. I think the $60 price point will be more normal when the game goes live. But that vote of confidence allows us to really proceed more quickly and strongly here to the finish line. So we would much appreciate that. And then, of course, but since you mentioned, I have to put out a pitch for saying at least do, for those of you who can afford it, and I know many can't, but if you can afford it, do think through the property ownership. Because, again, if you go back to UO, property ownership became one of the most speculatable real money transaction that you could do.
I made a lot of money in that market.
So even though that we're asking people to give us a fair bit of money to come in and own one of these early house deeds, this game's real estate will actually be more rare and special than they were in my previous work. And so it is possible. I'm not sure we would literally block where it would be. We'd sell out literally all of the real estate, but we could get there. In that, we've already done a count of all the cities and all the towns and all the villages that we intend to put on the first map when we release it. And that is what you see in the Kickstarter, is that block of real estate. So if that all sells out, then there won't be much, if any, left when we launch the game. And if there's demand, we might be able to build 1, 2, 3 more villages, in the woods hither and yon. But we're not going to be interested or willing to build villages, non-stop, square to square to square to square all the way across the continent. That won't make much of a very interesting place to play.
Right.
And so anyway, real estate is I think will be a good investment.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I'm looking forward to it, and there's a link in the description if you're watching this on YouTube that goes to the Shroud of the Avatar official site. There's also one to our fan page, and then I guess that's it. So get your money in, and let's do it. I'm excited.
Thank you very much. I look forward to not only playing with you personally. Obviously, we bump into each other with some frequency, but really, if your community on your site has things that you would like us to do to support them, please don't be shy. That's why we're doing this. We've already made modifications on the pledge levels and what you get out of them. We're just as happy to make changes in the final game features itself because we're making it for you. So please come in, vote with a little bit of your money, and then start voting with your words. Tell us what you think we should do.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And
Absolutely.
look forward to seeing you in the game.
Pleasure.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.